Protea, the bodyguard, the blooming flower, the queen of time. Hey, I'm Hydra. If you're watching this, it means you want to learn how to play Protea and how to mod her kit. I'll show you 3 builds that you can use at any stage of your game, from a 0 forma beginner build to a multiple forma advanced loadout. Before we jump into it, let me explain Protea's abilities. If you already know these, go to this timestamp. Protea's passive is a really strong one. Every 4th ability you cast will have 100% additional power strength. This heavily encourages a spammy, ability-focused gameplay, which all the builds in this guide will exploit. This is important. Without a more niche, synergizing build, Protea is played spamming her abilities. Protea's first, Grenade Fan, allows us to throw grenade on the ground that damage enemies on button press, or it gives you overshields on button held. The damage grenades will also stagger and crowd control, which is invaluable in many missions. The shield grenades are your go-to survival tool, keep them on yourself at all times. Protea's second, Blaze Artillery, deploys a turret that fires at the enemy, dealing hit damage. The turret's damage increases with the number of enemies that it hits, so if you want to make the most of it, activate it when facing a group of enemies. It doesn't cover the full 360 degrees around itself, so make sure you're aiming at the group. Protea's third, Dispensary, deploys a blooming flower that produces resources such as ammo, health, and energy orbs. This is a great asset for the sake of survivability and pairs really well with the Equilibrium mod, which all the builds will include. Protea's fourth, Temporal Anchor, calls upon the void powers of Untime. A countdown begins. From now on, all the damage you deal and the ammo and energy you use are stored. At the end of the countdown, you produce a gigantic explosion that deals damage based on how much damage you dealt during the countdown, and it refunds the resources that you spent. You can also end it early by tapping the button again. Ending Temporal Anchor also cleanses status effects on your Warframe. These are Protea's basic abilities, so without further ado, let's get into the builds. Protea's 0 forma beginner build focuses on ability spam, meaning you want to take advantage of your first, second, and third to stay alive and deal damage. The first ability is good crowd control and survivability, while the second is your through DPS. Aim towards a group of enemies, cast your second, and watch them melt. Your third is your energy economy. Cast it as soon as the mission starts and as often as you can. Equilibrium will do the rest. Be smart in using your passive and use it on the turrets when it's available. They are your primary form of DPS. I would like to point out that this build can easily carry you through Steel Path completely solo. In this footage, I'm using the build on Steel Path Earth Defense, and it's almost too easy. I did not use my guns, not even once. The only expensive part of this build is Blind Rage. You can farm Blind Rage on any Deimos node that has an Orokin Vault, but the real issue for a beginner will be the Endo and credits to fuse it to the maximum rank. If you can't max it out, swap it with Intensify until you can afford it. Same goes for Redirection, and you can swap it for Fast Deflection instead. At the intermediate level, we start going into more powerful and capacity-hungry mods. Because your turret deal heat status, Archon Vitality is an obvious choice. We don't have to level it all the way, because we only need the extra effect. In fact, you can leave it unranked. Temporal Artillery is a new augment for Protea that attaches one of the already existing turrets to your Warframe during Temporal Anchor. The duration of the turret will be frozen in time, but the multiplier won't go above 20 times, which should be more than enough already. With this build, you'll focus on keeping your turrets alive for as long as possible. Roam around the battlefield, hit your enemies from every angle, and keep that turret damage going. If you cast Temporal Anchor, immediately after it ends, you'll pick up the turret again and continue trucking along. Heat status cuts enemy armor by a half, which is great since the status rework gave a lot of power to partial armor stripping. You'll be able to deal even more damage than ever before. If you have Archon Shards available, I personally recommend slotting at least 1 Ember for the additional casting speed and a couple of reds for ability duration or strength. To survive, you will rely on shield gating. Your overshield grenades will give you 5 seconds of shield gate, which is absolutely massive and should give you plenty of time to cast your first again. They will also constantly regenerate your shields and make you much harder to kill. Do not use Brief Respite or the Ogre mods because those will reset your shields and the extra shield gate time will be completely useless. For Arcanes, I strongly recommend Arcane Aegis for the extra shield tanking. I also like Energize a lot since it takes my mind off of casting Dispensary all the time, but strong picks for her are also Molt Efficiency and Molt Augmented, which you can get from Zariman missions or from Cavalleros' shop. In the advanced build, you have everything available to you, so let's make a crazy loadout. The Protea build is mostly the same, with a few prime mods here and there. What matters is the synergy with other equipment. The more enemies your artillery hits, the better, so let's pair Protea up with a grouping weapon, such as the Proboscis Cernos. The Cernos' arrows will group up enemies, making it easier for your artillery to ramp up the damage. This is a good build you can go for, which also acts as a primer. Secondly, you can give Protea a good crit secondary of your choice. Tenet Planks, Piranha Prime, Critical Item, you name it. The only thing you should remember to do is install Cascadia Flare, which will give the weapon extra damage when you trigger hit status with your artillery. I like the Euphona Prime a lot, so this is the build that I use with my Protea. If you want to go all in with the synergy between Protea's second and your secondary weapon, you can slot in a couple of Topaz Archon Shards. When you kill an enemy affected by heat, you will gain bonus crit chance on your secondary weapon. For companions, of course Nautilus is an obvious choice because of the grouping precept, Cordon. Remember to slot in Synth Fiber and Synth Deconstruct so you can take full advantage of the Equilibrium mod and pick up the red orbs even when you're full on health. Unfortunately, Nautilus is a bit of a pain in the ass to farm, so here's a Panzer Vulpaphyla build for general use. The viral stacks will help in reducing the enemy's effective HP. Of course, if you're a beginner or intermediate, you can still take inspiration from these builds by themselves if you have the resources. This concludes this quick Protea build video. Let me know in the comments how these builds are working for you and any changes you would make. You can find me playing Warframe on Twitch at twitch.tv/SimirianHydra. So come on over, have a chat. I've been Hydra, and thank you for watching.